We sang about sinking sand. Well, we've been long already, and I'd rather let you listen to her than me. Come on up here. This young lady is an example of God's faithfulness and His goodness and His grace, and what a testimony she has. She's one of our own that grew up in the church here as well. Mrs. Shana Friese, her husband Dalton, her 2 children, and we asked her to share her story with us today as well. So Shane, will you make her welcome?
Good morning, everyone. So Pastor asked me to share part of my story a couple months ago, and I said, certainly. I do this for a living. I'm super excited to do it. Because for those of you who don't know, I work in an inpatient rehab facility, and so I talk to people all day, every day. Like, that's what I do. And I wasn't nervous at all until Wednesday night when I came for Bible study, and he said, yeah, about 200 people coming. And I was like, oh, goodness. All right, now I'm a little bit nervous, so please bear with me. I might get a little jumbled up, but so like Pastor said, I came here as a child. I came here probably around the year 2000. I was around 10 years old. And my best friend's family had originally invited me to come to this church. So if the Tollicksons are watching online, or if you guys get this streaming eventually, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to you guys who brought me here. So I came here for about 6 years until I was 16 years old. And through that time back then, instead of having the overhead, we had a little projector that sat over there, and my job was to put the films on the projector, and it would show everything for the songs and everything that we would sing. So I started doing that. I grew up in the youth group. I was a major part of the youth group and planned a whole bunch of events and all those types of things, and that was great for me. But when I was 16, I met my first boyfriend, and then I had better things to do, unfortunately. So I quit coming to church. And that started me down a road that was not great. I graduated high school, went to college, and through my college time, I became addicted to substances. So if you don't know me well, I am an addict in recovery, which is what led me to work in an inpatient rehab facility. But so I started using drugs and alcohol heavily during my college years. I did graduate college, and everything seemed to be okay for a while. I kept everything together. I had a job. I got my own apartment, had my own car. I did all the things, and I kept things on the outside, and I made it look really nice. You know, I tied it up in a little bow, and I said, whatever I'm doing, you know, outside of here that people can't see isn't important, just as long as I can keep everything in order. I can do this behind closed doors, and I can still be this person on the outside, and it's going to be fine. Well, that eventually turned into a mess. If anybody, and I'm not going to ask for a raise of hands, but if anybody has ever struggled with substance abuse, it's not very long that you can kind of keep things under wraps. And so things started to fall apart fairly quickly. I was using, and I lost my job, which, I mean, it wasn't a great job. I had a job, it wasn't a great job. It wasn't what I went to school for. It wasn't anything that I was super proud of doing or anything like that, but it was a job. I lost that job. I quickly lost my apartment and moved back in with my parents, who begrudgingly allowed me to move back home because they had found out what I was doing with all my time and money. My car broke down, so I didn't have a car. And if you're not familiar with substance abuse, some of the other things that come along with it is that I became like a pretty negative and nasty person, for lack of better words. I would lie, cheat, steal, any of those things to get what I needed. Even though I didn't want to do those things, I would go to bed every night saying, like, tomorrow, Shana, you're going to be different. This isn't who you are. And I would often think about this place and how I grew up here. I would think about my parents and all the things that they kind of helped me create in my life, going to college and doing all those things successfully, and what they wanted for me. And so every night And if you've ever tried to start a diet, it's very, very similar. Sunday night, you're great. Tomorrow morning is Monday morning, and I'm going to start this diet. I'm going to do this thing. When you want to quit using drugs, it's very, very similar to that. So every night, Shana, you're not doing this tomorrow. Everything's going to be fine. You can do this. It's going to be a rough couple days, but at the end of that, you're going to be fine. And I would pray to God often, please take this from me because I don't want to do this anymore. And unfortunately, the next day, I would wake up and I would be sick and I would be tired and I would be scared and I couldn't do it. And so the little voice inside my head would say, just this one time, Shana. It's okay, just this one time. And we'll do it. We'll try again tomorrow. Maybe you'll have better luck tomorrow. Unfortunately, that was a continuous pattern for about a year. And then in 2015, I was, like I said, I was living at home with my parents. Things really started to fall apart for me. I had some jobs here and there, nothing that I could consistently keep. I weighed probably 90 pounds when I moved back in with my parents. It wasn't a great look for me. I was very sick, very dirty all the time because I just couldn't take care of myself anymore. And my mom, she begged me to meet somebody at the church here. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, I didn't want to. I wanted to get clean and I wanted to do some things, but I had been away from this place for so long that I was embarrassed to come back, and so I didn't want to see anybody. But she begged me to come, so I did, and that person was Pastor Chris. And I was just texting her last week when I was getting ready to do, all this. I said I was taking a trip down memory lane, and I remember us meeting in Pastor's office one night, and I was scared, and I found out last week that she was also scared because neither of us really knew what to do. And so we talked for a little bit, and I think I met with her a couple more times after that, probably not very consistently because keeping a drug addict consistent with anything is very, very difficult. And I spoke to my parents about it. I spoke to Pastor Chris about it. I spoke to a lot of people about how I wanted to get clean, and I meant that. I really did. It didn't look like it. If you were to look at me on the outside, it didn't, like, my behaviors did not match any of that, of me wanting to get clean. But I really deep down wanted to get clean, but I couldn't do it on my own. And I didn't realize it at the time, but there were some things being put into place, not by me, but and I don't even think by any person, but by God, just putting certain people in my life for when I was ready to take that step. So 2015, in, I want to say March, I found out that I was pregnant with my son. And you would think that would be enough to stop doing what I was doing. And it came to a point where I really wanted to get clean and I wanted to do the right thing, and I would go days and days and days without using. And the obsession would come back and I would use again, and I hated myself. I hated myself more than anybody else could hate me for what I was doing, because I knew that I wasn't just hurting myself anymore, I was hurting somebody else, which was my baby. But I couldn't get it together, and it was embarrassing, and I could feel like the shame and the accusations from everybody else, even though they wouldn't really say anything, but they were just trying to push me in the right direction. So I found out I was pregnant on March 11th. On April 12th, I woke up on a Sunday morning, and I decided, for whatever reason, because I hadn't been back in church for 10 years almost, 9 years. I just woke up and I said, you know what, Mom, I want to go to church today. And I remember her being like, oh my goodness, yes, let's go. And like I'm pretty sure was like, okay, this is it. Now we're going to get somewhere. So we get dressed. We come to church. I run into Pastor Chris. I'm excited that I'm pregnant, and I'm thinking, like, she's going to be excited as well. And I remember saying, oh my goodness, guess what? I'm pregnant. And her mouth said that she was excited for me. Her face did not. I could see it in her eyes of, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Which was the exact same thing that I had been thinking and my mom had been thinking and my dad was probably thinking, although he wouldn't say it. But I was here, right? And that was an important step, I think, in the process. And I know that it was an important step in the process because, ironically, Pastor had, and I brought this with me because it's super important to me now. Pastor preached a lesson that day about facing your problems. And it was from Jeremiah 23. And essentially, he talked about sheep out in the pasture, and when a storm comes in, what they do is they all huddle around each other, their heads in the center, so that they can face the storm together. And when they're in a group, they're not easily blown over or lost or any of those types of things. And I thought to myself, because my boyfriend at the time had gone to jail, and I'm thinking, I'm sitting out here and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a great lesson for him. He's in jail, he needs to hear this lesson. So I go home and I write him this long, long letter, right? And I feel like I want him to hear what I just heard because it, was life-changing for me. I thought it would be life-changing for him. However, on April 15th, which was 3 days later, I ended up incarcerated. And what it turns out is that message was actually for me. And it took me a while to realize that. But I saved this. Ironically, when I got home, I found this. And I was like, wow, that whole time, I didn't realize it, but, certain things led me to that place, this church, on this day, to hear that message for this exact reason. So I had to learn how to face the storm. And, being incarcerated, I was away from my family, obviously. It's dirty. It's cold there. It's not great, as you can imagine. And I'm pregnant, and I'm lonely, and I'm sad, and I'm disappointed in myself. And I can't believe that I've let my life turn out like this. So I spent 60 days in Lake Cumming County Prison, and during that time, I didn't really know what to do, and I was scared the majority of the time that I was there. And one of the things that was an option is that if you have a pastor or somebody religious related wants to come in, you can do that outside of what your normal visitation schedule is. So I don't know why she would be willing to do this, but Pastor Chris was willing to come in and visit me. And that meant a lot to me during that time because I was so scared and I didn't know what else to do. And I don't know what exactly brought us together outside of God, but she gave me so much hope that it was okay and that I could make a change in my life. And so I went from there to a long-term treatment facility. The judge said that I couldn't go home until after I had my baby to make sure that the baby was well taken care of and healthy when he was born. So if Judge Lavecchio ever hears this message, I want you to know that you made a really big difference in my life, because my son was born on October 23rd, 2015 at 9 pounds, 3 ounces, 21 3/4 inches long. He was the biggest baby I've ever seen. And I did nothing to deserve such a healthy and, happy baby. And it's only because of God that I was able to have him and that he was okay. I did nothing to deserve that. Absolutely nothing. But while I was in treatment, I had 6 months to sit there and wait and think about what I was going to do different with my life. And that was also, a lonely experience. I was away from my family. Obviously, no friends. Pretty much everybody that I had talked to outside of my family had left. They didn't want to talk to me anymore. I had gotten a lot of letters saying, like, Shana, I hope that you can get it together, but right now I can't, be supportive of you because I've been let down so many times in the past. And I had to understand that, and I had to accept that for what it was. The people that I really spent time with weren't really good influences on me. They were people in the same situation that I was. So luckily, they didn't want to reach out to me anymore either, but it was a very lonely experience for a while. And I wasn't really sure what else to do, and so I leaned in as hard as I could into God. And I started kind of creating my own Bible studies, and I would do daily devotions every single morning. The treatment facility would let us go to church every Sunday, and I went to church every Sunday for a couple months until the end of my pregnancy when I got too big to walk. So I went back to the basics for me, and that was, renewing my faith and building back my relationship with God, because what else did I have left? And what I learned through that experience is that when you lose everything, or when things start falling apart, sometimes God allows that to happen because it makes you rebuild that relationship with him. And that's exactly what it was for me in my experience. Through that experience. So I talked about Jeremiah 23. If you ever get an opportunity to read it, if you weren't here for that sermon, please go back and take a peek at it, because it was really great. Jeremiah 23, 19 through 24. But the second verse that I really was meaningful to me, so during that time, I really started learning how to meditate on the word, because that's not something that I ever really did before. Like I said, I created my own Bible study and just kind of did it on my own. But I also started learning how to meditate on certain verses. And so Pastor Chris, she would continue to come see me down at the rehab along with my parents. My sister came one time. But Pastor Chris would send me cards. And another thing that was so influential was that a lot of the ladies in the church would send me cards. Now, I was a dirtball. For lack of a better word, that's who I was. I was a dirtball person that did not deserve any support or any love or anything like that. At least that's how I felt. And here I was, so far removed from the church, and I have people sending me letters and sending me cards and just encouraging me that I hadn't seen in years, or some of them I hadn't met yet. And I couldn't understand why they would do that, because I didn't feel like I deserved it. But one of the cards I had gotten from Pastor Chris had Ephesians 6:10, and that taught me a lot about strength. And so I would meditate on that. Finally, be strong in the Lord and his mighty power. I wasn't strong, obviously. I had put myself in this situation where I let substances take control over me, so I clearly didn't have control over my own life. And so I had to learn how to be strong in something else, which was the Lord. And he kind of gave me the strength to get through that situation, because it's a difficult situation. I was gone for almost 8 months total. And like I said, it was during my pregnancy, and so I didn't have no baby shower, no gender reveal, no maternity photos, nothing. I couldn't decorate the nursery. I couldn't do any of that stuff, and I had to rely on my mom at home to really how was I going to get baby clothes? She did that for me. But outside of that, I had no strength left, and so I had to learn how to rely on God again and be my strength. The next verse that I spent a really long time meditating on this, was Psalms 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations, and I will be exalted on the earth. What else am I going to do while I'm in a treatment facility for 6 months? And so this spoke to me, and it still does today, of just be still, Shana. Calm down. You're not going to fix this. There was nothing I could do to fix that situation. Only God could fix the situation. And so now, even continuously throughout my life, when things get really stressful or things get really crazy, it's just be still, Shana, and know that I'm God, because no matter what you do, you don't have control over it. Only God does. and I would meditate on that one every morning and remind myself. I would read it every day and just say, like, okay, God's telling me again, be still, Shana, because you can't do it on your own. As time went on, as I got ready to have my baby, I got into more of the New Testament. That's where my Bible study and God had led me to go. And so Colossians 1:16, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and things on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. And so what I got out of that is, what is my purpose? What was the purpose of all this for me? Because, Pastor has been talking about a lot about like your test into your testimony, or your mess into your message, or your story, his glory. Like what is the bigger picture of this? Because I can't see it. God can see the bigger picture. I can't see what the bigger picture is. And so I really considered what that meant for a long time, and I didn't have the answer. So then I had my son. I finally got to come home, and I came back to church, and when I came back here for the first Sunday back, it really felt like I was home again. And it was the first time that I felt like I could really breathe, and that I had finally, this was like the end goal for me, because everybody had been so supportive of me while I was there. And so I got out on a Thursday, I think, and then I got here Sunday, and it was just like, okay, finally I made it. It was like when you get across the finish line and you just kind of throw yourself across, and okay, here I am. I finally got back to where I need to be. So my purpose for a while was taking care of my son, and continuing to rebuild my relationship with God, rebuilding relationships with the positive people in my life, getting really involved in church, and just learning, and still continuing to be still and listen and try to understand things in a bigger picture view instead of just how it's affecting me. I was lucky enough that about 6 months into that journey, after I got home, I met my husband, and we and things just kind of worked out really well. We both had a lot of similar goals and similar ambitions, and we moved in together, and this is something that I've talked about during Bible study in the past, is that, Dalton and I moved in together before we were married, which is obviously not something that is, smiled upon, and not my suggestion of how you should go about things. But I think that our relationship was blessed and anointed by God, and just, things happened really perfectly. And so we got married, we had our daughter, and now we have this, beautiful family, which none of it, if you were to look at me, 8 years ago compared to now, I can't imagine personally that my life has turned out as well as it has. In the process, after Dalton and I got together, I went back to what is my purpose, and I still wasn't sure. And again, I sought out Pastor Chris, and she said, why don't you go back to school and, do counseling or something for a living? And I thought, oh, that sounds awful. Ugh. I don't know how to talk to people. No, I don't want to do that. But I decided, what's the worst that could happen? So I go back to school. I graduated with my master's degree in addictions counseling, and I got a job in that field, and I still was thinking like, ooh, I don't know. I really don't know how to talk to people. This is really awkward for me. So, but what I found out during the process is that sometimes people can pick up things about you that you can't pick up about yourself. And so what I find is that people generally tell me things, and that I'm a person that's easy to talk to. At least that's what I've been told. I've progressed at my job fairly quickly, which I swear is not my doing. I couldn't have done that because, again, I'm super awkward to talk to, I guess. At least that's my perspective. But I think that my heart's in it, and I think that God has called me to do that. And that's why I've been successful in helping other addicts trying to find recovery. So I've been asked in the past why for me, after I got clean, it was easy to stay clean. And because normally people struggle to continue to do those things, to stay clean and not fall back into old patterns and old behaviors. And I'm not saying that I haven't fallen back into some old patterns and behaviors, but it doesn't have anything to do with drugs or alcohol, just, some negative behaviors. And so, but it has been a lot easier for me. And the last verse that I want to share with you guys today is Romans 12:2, which probably most of you know, and it's a renewal of mind. Do not conform to the patterns of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I think that a lot of the changes in my life have become easier because I've been willing to look for God first in the situation. So when things get difficult for me, what is the right answer? I don't know. I should pray about it first. And it usually comes a lot easier. And again, I think that's a lot of the reason why things, as far as my job goes, as far as being at home go, and my relationships, and why they have been going so well, is because it's not because I've been trying to force my way and make them better, but because I've been focusing more on what the goodness I can get from God and what his will is for me in my life. And when I'm focused more on what his will is instead of what my will is, things seem to work out a lot better. I spent a number of years just trying to, get my way and get what I wanted, no matter what I had to do to get it. And it never worked out well. I might be successful in that for a short amount of time, but it was never a long-term satisfaction. And so what I found is that I can have long-term satisfaction. I can actually be pleased with myself and feel fulfilled if I'm doing what God has planned for me to do. And so with that, man, when I planned this out in my head, I felt like it sounded a lot better. But with that being said, I hope you guys has gained something from what I've shared with you today. If you know anybody struggling, and it doesn't even have to be with addiction, anybody struggling with, anything like that, I'm a person that would be willing to talk to you. I would be, even if you're not looking for advice or just, just somebody, an ear to hear you, I'm hoping that I can do that for you. And so, thank you, Pastor. Where are you? Thank you for having me share today. And thank you, Pleasant View Wesleyan, for just always being that rock behind me and giving me the opportunity to grow as a person and grow in the Lord. So thank you.